Hey, welcome to the Runaways podcast. My name is Cody. Today we're going to be talking about, is an open meta even good? And what the problems with it are, what the positives of them are. But today I am joined back from his vacation from Disney. Dan, I felt like I missed you last week. We ran the ship without you, and then I missed you all week of testing. How was your trip? Was it worth it?
I'd say so. The trip was amazing. It was so much fun. Me and my wife had a lot of good times together. Disney's great. We did a lot of Star Wars things. I made a lightsaber. That was cool. I think the best part was just getting making a lightsaber?
Yes.
Oh yeah. No, dude, it was awesome. I think the best part was just I think we averaged what was it? 15 miles or 10 miles a day of walking? Something crazy. Great exercise. But no, the trip was awesome. I felt super far behind. It was a pretty crucial week to miss because we just started to understand these new heroes and where they fit, and our chans are this weekend. So I've been sleep depriving myself a little bit. So I might be a little spacey today on the cast trying to catch up.
Yeah, you came back from your trip and you were like, okay, so what are we playing? And spoiler alert to everyone listening, nobody knew. It was just, we have no idea.
Oh.
What's the correct answer? I'm also joined today. Back is Connor, our Dash aficionado who might not be playing Dash. Doesn't know. It's weird. I have two specialists on here. I have Connor for Dash, and then obviously we have the Prison Boy, Pheano here. But Connor, this is the first time that I've heard you during testing where you're not 100% playing Dash already.
Yeah, still trying to figure things out, feel the temperature of the water for her. I think she still has a lot of upsides. She's still great, awesome deck, but just trying to figure out exactly where she falls for the matchups. I think I have to give up on my true queen, though, Dash.io, but we're going to see if I can come up with anything super creative to figure out some of her problems. But we're still trying, but the metagame's so wide open. There's so many good decks right now. It's awesome.
Yeah. And then last but not least, we have Pheano, who has followed some breadcrumbs that were left by LSS and the recent Battle Hardened winner, and might now be able to play Prism again if the deck's even real and not actually fake. But Pheano, how you feeling now that you know where the breadcrumbs are?
I just want to first say that so far 100% of the podcasts I've joined with you guys, Dan has come back from a vacation.
Where was I last time?
The Realm cruise.
Oh, that's fair. I didn't miss the cast, but I was on a cruise. That was an awesome.
Yeah, 100% of the time you've come back on the cast, and I came on, and you're like, "Here's this awesome trip I've been on," and I'm just sitting here being
I'm just a vacation enjoyer.
Look at the snow.
We got a snow today.
I just actually right before getting on this was streaming Prism, and deck's fun, at least. There's maybe something there. It's one of those definitely worth exploring some more, and we'll see. I'm going to be streaming some more of that, so if you guys want some Prism content, check out the channel.
I will say this has been an interesting testing cycle. We know it's a serious testing cycle because I saw Pheano playing games that weren't Illusionist. It's you have to understand, it's a month and a half, right? Or a month away from Pro Tour. And I was talking to Pheano the other day. He's like, I can't play games right now. I'm too busy grinding the Kasai over here. And I was like, wait, you're playing a deck that's not Illusionist and it's a month and a half before the tournament and you're just grinding games? That's how you know the meta is in a weird state.
Yeah. I don't play as much as I probably should. For people that don't know, Lil, the one that I got top 8 at, I literally didn't play for it was 2 or 3 weeks prior to that event. I do as I say, not as I do. When it comes to practice, I don't lead by example when it comes to that.
Yeah, that was a good indicator that we got some stuff to learn or figure out before Pro Tour. I will say this is, and I don't have an issue saying this, there's not one person on our team who knows what they're playing at Pro Tour. So yeah, that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So the main topic that we are going to get into is the open meta. Is it even a good thing that we have an open meta? Is it a great thing that we have an open meta? I mean, the first part I would say is what do you think? What do you think the positives are of having such a diverse open meta as we currently have? I don't know, Connor. I'll let Dan go last since he has been away on vacation. But Connor, what do you think are some of the positive things about having such an open meta?
I think an open meta makes a really rewarding experience for players. It keeps a lot of people's pet heroes like within striking distance of being a good deck, and if the room shifts a certain way, it's like a really good choice. So I think it's good that people who are vested in one hero, one class, they still feel like their experience is valid and they can always play something within that realm and be pretty happy with it. I think that honestly is a big mover of how happy the Fab or any TCG community is like, is the deck I like to play and that I love and am attached to, can I play it without feeling bad? And in an open meta game, the answer is way more likely to be yes. Unless you've got some real fringe tastes, then I can't really help you too much. But
hey, Teklo Vossen topped, so sometimes your French, your French tastes are good, I guess. Apparently,
yeah, anything's possible in this world. Apparently,
last week we would have called Prism Fringe, right?
Yeah, absolutely,
absolutely. And so this open meta keeps everybody able to play their decks, and I think it rewards a lot of experience too on your deck. The Prism player, the Rob Catton that won last week, like, he probably played a lot more matchups of his deck into his opponent's deck than his opponent had played of their deck into his deck. Like, he probably had the experience edge in all those matchups. And so if you kind of stick to your niche that's still playable right now, it's like you have the experience, you've played those matchups a bunch. I think that really is something that's rewarding for players, and I think it rewards what we want them to be doing, which is playing weekly, playing against different decks, like devoting their time to the game, practicing all those different things. So I personally like an open meta game. But I think it just really is good for the health of the game.
I have like two and a half thoughts of positives. Because I assume we're just going over positives.
We'll go over
right
positives.
Now.
We'll mix them later.
The first 1.5 is, I think it leads to a period of the game being interesting. Like, oh, it's a lot of exploration. There's exciting things going on. No one quite knows what's happening, and cool stories can happen, like the Prism thing, like the Teklo thing. Like, you have these narratives that come about, and that leads to good coverage, that leads to engagement from the viewers, the casual audience. Like, it's not just this hyper grindy, min-maxy, just what's the best 3 decks that we've been seeing for the past couple months. There's no staleness. I think that leads to a lot of fun moments. And then the other thing is, I think people that are good at brewing, or they figure something out before other people, you get a lot of equity. Like, you're the first one to figure out Dash.io, you get second place at a calling. You're the first one to figure out Prism, you get second place at a Battle Hardened. Like, we've seen this happen time and time again. This has happened in other card games before. Like, this is nothing new. New open meta, you figure out the broken thing before anyone else, you get a lot of free W's. So there's a lot of equity if you're creative and understand how to figure something out before other people.
I do believe that Prism won as well, so not even second place.
Did it win? Oh no, you're right. They're not
on Team Runaways. They can actually win tournaments. They don't just get second place.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Okay, Dan, what do you think? Positive things about having an open meta.
I have so many negatives.
I know. That's why we got to save that for later.
I don't think I have any new points. I think they hit the good points pretty well. Like, you can just play. If you like a deck, you can play it. And if it's a good deck, like, you made the right choice. The issue comes if you don't like any decks. Then it's just like, what do you do? There's no answer. There's nothing you enjoy playing, and it's kind of tough.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Although they said
a little bit of the positives, I guess I'll say, is just that you get to play what you like. You don't feel like you're completely out, like was mentioned previously. Mm-hmm. But to look at it, I think this is very casual to semi-casual friendly. I know there are some, like, there's definitely some very vocal professional players who really like the open meta themselves. I know a lot of people don't, but I think this is very, like, new player, casual friendly. It feels like you're not, like, just sitting down at your armory playing the same 3 decks in a row. If you actually go out to your RTN, it's going to be like an experience. You can bring whatever you want, and you're not just sitting there playing against Lexi 5 times. And I think that, like, makes people actually want to go out and participate in the events. So, like, for the health of the game, in a, like, I'm trying to sell it at a local place, I think it's very good.
Yeah, I personally enjoy an open meta for like a period of time. But I enjoy it when it's like not leading into like the Pro Tour or something like that. Like I don't want to sit down at Pro Tour and be like, I have no idea what to expect. I don't, because then it's like, how do I appropriately utilize my time? And it can lead me feeling like this was a waste of my time and money going to this event because I have no idea what I was supposed to prep for. We're like going to an RTN or something, whatever. Like if I lose because I didn't know what I was expecting, I wasted an hour of gas maybe. Like that's not a big deal. But then it can also lead to cool, fun, interesting things. It's whatever. I hang out with my friends, have a good time. It's not an important event.
Yeah.
But I don't want to deal with that at like a big major or something like that.
I mean, we could piggyback off that. I think an open meta is great when the matchup spread isn't horrendous. And I think that is the real issue going in the piece that I think most people are complaining about is that in the past, we've had like a couple top decks, 2 or 3 maybe, in that maybe just one. But the matchup spread for decks like under that, they only had to deal with like one matchup that was super bad for it, for example. But right now, it is feeling like no matter what deck you pick, you have matchups that are just 20%. You just lose the game and you can only win 20% of the time. And like that never feels good, right? Because that introduces what we're talking about, which is like, you know, like a gem luck. I don't know if Dan, you want to explain to people what people are referring to when they say gem luck.
Yeah, it's basically saying like it's like the luck outside of the game. So like you're bringing a deck, and if you get paired into all of your good matchups, like yeah, you're probably going to win that event. But if your gem luck is bad and you play your 20% or even less, your unwinnable matchup, you just lose. Like because you brought this deck and you didn't know what you were going to play against because the meta's too open and it's just bad gem luck.
Yeah, I'll give everyone an example at home. I'm going to talk about Kasai again for every single podcast. But Kasai has a bunch of matchups that are like really positive for Kasai. And then Kasai has 3 matchups that it can't win almost ever. And they're Dromai, Pistol Dash, and Pheano. And these aren't just like, these are hard. You have other matchups that are hard, and you have the mirror. Besides that, you have 3 matchups, Dromai, Pheano, Pistol Dash, in which you're like a 20% or less chance to win. That's horrendous. Like you go to a tournament, you see like 2 Dromai, a Pheano. That's 3 of your losses out of, you know, any of your other events. That's not even taking into account your matchups that are close, your matchups that you're a mirror in. And it goes like this for like almost every deck in the game. They just have these matchups that are being played right now that are just 20%ers. I mean, how do we feel about this? Any thoughts on the gem luck aspect?
So much. I'm losing so much sleep trying to like answer this unanswerable question of what's the right deck. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of rough. Like we try and min-max all these things, right? Like we take this prep very seriously and we're trying to find the correct answer at the end of the day with all this imperfect data. But now it's like imperfect data that's also like completely random because everything's viable, so you don't know what you're up against. You can't tech your deck correctly. You can't pick the deck correctly. So it's just like, I don't know. I'm going a little crazy over here. I'm probably just going to pick a deck tomorrow, and that's my Pro Tour deck, and be done with it.
It's also weird in Fab where it's like, compared to other games, even when something's like really good, we don't have the same level of adoption to that deck as other card games do. Like we have an Eldrazi winter moment. The deck's like broken. We're not going to get 50, 70% of the field playing that deck. People are just going to go, nah, I'd win, and just play their Prism deck. They like look at Pro Tour 1. Like you had 3 decks that were obviously you play these, and none of them were like crazy adoption. They were like weighted heavier than other things, but you still had other people playing other decks, so it's tough. And that was probably one of the more extreme ones too. I think everything else since then has probably been less extreme of a percentage of deck representation.
And Connor, you're normally playing Dash, but you obviously have matchups that are holding you back from just like locking in Dash right now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I think that the gem, like getting those unlucky or bad matchups, it is definitely a part of it. And you kind of have to pick whichever ones you're okay sacking or just being weak to. Like, okay, I really hope, I know no one in my area is very good at math. I'm going to play a deck that's bad in a Pheano. Like, I think that's like kind of some calls you have to make, like those kind of things. But I also do think that...
You're calling me out on the cast?
Listen, I'm getting ready for some tournaments. I'm working on my homework for everybody, you know. But I think one thing I think that is like we look at it as like a lucky thing, but I think you can also kind of build your deck in a way to give you some percentage points in different places, like building very flexible plans and card choices to give you a little bit of equity. Like I know coming from Magic, like it was always like if you could find a card that would like answer one kind of permanent and then also give you some answers to another kind and just like give you a little bit more flexibility on everything, you would get a lot of equity out of that through playing it in multiple tournaments. Like you'd find spots for that card to do its thing. And I think that finding those tough matchups and then trying to be like, okay, I'm going to play Oasis or Spite instead of Shunt. So that way, like I'm a little bit better into Kano. Like those small deck building decisions do come up more, and you kind of have to pick which ones you're okay not being as prepped for. But if you can find those small equity, like that small little bump of equity from your card choices, I do really enjoy that part of it. And I think that makes like the wild westness of an open meta like feel kind of fun and interesting and rewarding.
I would argue it happens a lot less in this game due to the fact that we have complete like archetype issues. We're not like all playing permanents and like we're not all playing the same way to play the game. So like a Kasai is, without blowing the entire deck up and then having no matchups into anything else, is not going to beat Dromai. It's just like not, because fundamentally the deck plays on an axis that Dromai wants to play on. And so the identity of the decks collide and Dromai wins those because they have actual permanents. It's like the same with Kano. Like you can put Oasis in your deck and you can put 3 Null Rune, but because your damage output is like nothing and their blocks don't matter, like they can block with whatever they want and just chip you and set up and play around Oasis. Like it takes you like 10 rounds to kill them. If they like, they could no block you for like 4 rounds most of the time and live. Like it's kind of ridiculous of just no blocking you, you know, without like super good hands lining up. And you can get hands that are just like swing 5 as like, because you're always expecting to block with some cards as a Kasai. So like you can't really make that matchup better. They just have the way that they're trying to play the game. You're just playing into their strategy. The same like Pistol. I can't break any items. Like I can't destroy items. So they just get to do whatever they want, right? Like they just set up a whole bunch of items and they do more damage than me on less cards. And I'm trying to block with 2 cards every round because that's how Kasai functions. Now, she has some tools with like trying to like raise an army or try to do this other stuff. But in practice, like that stuff doesn't really function very well in most of those matchups. You can't raise an army against, you know, Dash. They just pistol them all down in 1 round. Like it doesn't do anything, right? Like, so that's my issue with Fab is in all the past metas, for the most part, all the decks that you would consider bringing to a tournament would have like one matchup that was like just a 0%er. You're just like, I'm just not going to win this. I'll sack it. It's fine. Right. But, and then any deck that had more than that, you were just like, nah, I'm not going to play this. It's like, it's why we brought Icelander to Nationals, right? We were like literally sacking Lexi. We're like, yeah, we're probably 40% into this. We just need to play against this like 3 times and win 1, and then we're like good because we beat everything else.
Exactly.
Right? Yep. Like that's a viable strategy. But like right now, it feels like every deck I look at, it's like 3-0. Like they have 3 batches that are just 0%ers.
A part of it too is a lot of the decks that other decks are having issues into. So like we'll go back to your example, Dromai Kano. They're asking for different types of answers to each of them, where it's I can't bring an Oasis as a silver bullet for both of them. I need very, very different answers to these different things. So a lot of the things that are coming up as issues for deck of 0% matchups is blow up the deck to beat this, but then I still doesn't do anything for this other matchup. It's not like Magic where you can play a deck that operates on this axis, and then your sideboard can be like, I'm good into all of this, and then my sideboard just beats these things over here. Fab just doesn't quite work that way because just the amount of viable different strategies.
And the amount of punishment you're taking just to have the rest of your matchups not even be like 70 or 80%. I mean, literally, we played Icelander because we're like, dude, we're like 70% to everything but Lexi. Like, it was the only matchup. So we're like, yeah, I'll take that risk all day. And it paid off, right, Dan?
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
I'll do it again.
Yeah, I think that was like a good example of a good choice where the meta wasn't so open. But I don't know. Connor, what were you going to say?
Now there's just no choice. It's just like, I don't know. My advice is if you like a deck, just play it. And don't waste your time trying to figure all this out because it's not worth it.
I do like that we've gotten better answers, like those kind of silver bullets in heavy hitters. Like I feel like Ripple Away, the card that you can discard and they get no tokens, or Nasty Surprise. But they're kind of these more like very flexible blue block threes that into certain strategies and certain cards line up really well. So I do think they're giving us a little bit more tools. Shout out to Brian Gottlieb. But I think that that'll eventually keep growing as we get that toolbox, and it'll give you more of that kind of ability to split off your card choices. But no, you're definitely right though. The Fab hero identity thing kind of makes it where you kind of have to play a similar way a lot of the time, and you can't totally just jump to a different kind of game plan.
Oh, it's the triangle of death. Normally there's like a triangle meta, and you have like this deck counters this deck, which counters this deck, which counters this deck, and they're like, perfect. This is like the triangle of death, because this counter to this is like a 0%er. But then there's also this one over here. There's like one here that counters, and one here that counters, and one here that counters. You're like, I hope I just don't play this side of the matchups and play everything over here, right? Like,
it's like the Always Sunny in Philadelphia thing, where he's like has the thing he's trying to explain whatever it is. It's like that.
I do think this issue is also like one of the best parts of Flesh and Blood, though. Like, it's why the game is so cool, because like every hero plays differently, and it's like not the same axes, and you get to see how they clash against each other. But when you're grinding for a tournament and min-maxing and putting reps into every matchup, like it feels real bad when they're not winnable. And there's a lot of those.
Can we just ban Kano already? I'd be fine with that. I personally do not like that every deck has to consider Kano. But when they all do, Kano's a lot worse. It's just a frustrating matchup to have to play for, in my opinion.
Yeah, Peter was complaining about that on Twitter, where he's like, I got to learn a new deck. He's like, every round, everyone was packing like multiple Oasis type of cards. He's just like,
they deserve it. The Kanos have earned it.
Yeah. Self-correcting.
Yeah. I mean, when we think about the meta in general, we have, I mean, it's so opposite. We have like Teklovasan topping and then winning a game on stream, which is like never happened, right? And that's like, I'm not going to take anything away from the guy who topped. Like, he obviously did a great job. We have a local Teklo player at my locals who brings it every week. The deck is very strong when it's strong. And so props to him for sticking with something that he likes and then, being able to showcase it. But like, obviously he had really good gem pairings. And like, but that's what it kind of feels like for every deck. Like, yeah, you're bringing Teklovas and you're hoping like, I don't play against Wizard at all. Like, for example, there's several other matchups, but I don't play against Wizard at all because you just can't win at all. But like the whole tournament, dodge all the wizards. But if you sit down and play two wizards, you're like wizard. I just lose, right? Like, but that's every deck right now. So it's not even that crazy to bring Teklo anymore, right? Like,
wait, are we looking at the wrong decks?
Yeah.
Are we Teklo gamers?
Just whatever deck you like, just play it. Get the reps.
So, I think in general, moving from this meta. This RTN season is going to be very interesting. I think it's going to be pretty hard to. We're not going to end up with like one best deck. Everything just kind of counters each other a little bit. And I would prefer a meta. I think I personally prefer metas where there's like 3 main decks. That's the world I personally like living in. Is anyone have this meta as their favorite meta so far that we've played in?
My favorites are usually there's like one top dog and then like a couple things that are behind it that have play into it. So like it's everyone gunning for that first thing, and then that leads to interesting things too. Like, I'm going to go back to that PT one. Top dog in the meta, people are gunning for it, and then you got a couple of decks that are close behind it that have play into it. And then Kano comes out of nowhere because everyone's so hyper-focused on this. Where, again, that leads to interesting moments, and it does the same thing that I was just saying about open metas, where it leads to people that can be creative getting a lot of equity. Well, everyone's so hyper-focused on this, they just ignored this over here. So I think that leads to interesting moments, too.
Yep, it's just tough. I like it a lot less when you go to a tournament run and you have to be like, okay, well, what did you play against? Like, hey, this top. Okay, well, what did they play against? Like, that's like a barometer for if a deck is relevant or not, or if they just got paired into like good matchups all day, right? And I like that a little bit less, just as like a story. But I think this is just one of the first metas we had in a while that's like not pro centric. I think it is more casual and like mid-level centric, like people who are going to RTNs. They might go to callings and stuff, but they're not playing the hours that we're putting in, right? I wouldn't recommend anyone put the hours in that we put in. We're just like degenerates over here, and that's like what we do. But like, yeah, it feels like the first one that's like everyone else can get excited but the pros, and that's fine. That's acceptable.
Yeah, which is good.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Like that's a world that is fine to go in.
We'll figure it out. We'll gamble.
I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if I agree with that. I think you're underestimating the potential for things to narrow down as we get closer. Like, it's not the first time we've had an open meta. Like, things might get solved and narrow down a bit. If it was like literally next week, yeah. But
well, we will see, because after RTN, we will do a little tier list, and we will see what we think about it after that. It's just going to be everything in A and B, and they all kill each other, and that's going to be it. That's going to be the whole meta. Okay. I think we have talked about this enough, unless anyone has any points before we skip over. We do have a handful of questions to get into this week. Nope. Okay. Well, we are going to have to keep grinding because no one has a deck, and we should really lock in deck soon. Yeah. Feel bad for the Team Runaways. No one has a deck. It's all sad days over here. Every deck. So I would say every day someone has a new main, but that's not true. It's like every 2 hours. Okay, I'm 100% locking this deck in, and we're like, they play 3 games. Okay, well, I'm gonna lock in this other deck over here. And then it's like, well, what about this matchup?
My favorite was it 2 days ago? Yuanji just enters the call, and he's like, I had a dream about this deck. And then he just tried selling everyone on it, and then like I check back in a few hours later, and he's like, the dream is dead. It was the fastest death of a dream I've ever seen.
Yeah, we're actually just trying everything right now. Like, I played like 12 different heroes the past 2 days.
Yep. The amount of posts that go into our Discord that are just like, okay, we really got to look into this. And then like 5 hours later, we don't have to look into this anymore. It's the same as this other deck.
Yeah, which is great because like we're all like so determined to find this answer, but I'm now convinced it doesn't exist, and we should just do whatever you like, just do it.
Look, some people at the end of Pro Tour like are going to be really happy with their deck choice because they're going to play the game and they're not going to see their bad matchups, and they're going to be like, this is great. And then other people are going to bring the same deck and they're going to sit down and face their opposite matchups for half of their games and just be like, why did I bring this stupid hero? And that is the crippling anxiety that is choosing a deck for Pro Tour.
That was Worlds for me. I was like, oops, found ninjas.
Yep. Well, Prism is pretty good at ninjas.
Weirdly, not according to the data on that deck. It's apparently losing to Katsu, which that's wild to me.
It's close. You make one mistake, you lose the game. That's kind of how that matchup feels. You don't make a mistake and just smush them face. It feels fine. But Katsu is, I don't know. I had some really bad luck with Katsu the other day to the point where I was like, should I play Katsu? Like, they're just like doing crazy things as well. Like, it's every deck. You play a deck, they do something crazy against you, and you go, should I play that deck? Like, the other day when we lost to Viserai, we're like, should we play Viserai? Like, it's literally every single deck that pops up that you play against and lose to. You're like, maybe it's that one.
Yeah. We all just need to like identify your play style, what works the best for you. Pick the deck that matches, that has reasonable power and matchup spread. Just lock it in.
I do think it's easy for
there's a lot of value.
Anyone going to RTN. You just pick whatever deck you want to play it, and then you have a chance at winning, which is like not how.
Assuming you want to play a deck.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of value also in just like playing the thing that you have the most experience in. Like if you don't know, just play the thing that you've got a million reps in, because you're even in your bad matchups, you're going to know it better than they will. So if it's, not a cursed matchup where you like Kano into Kasai, like where you basically should just go get lunch. If it's anything closer than that, you still have equity that you can get there because you're like, this is a good matchup, but you played it 10 times. I've played it 100. I'll find your mistake.
At my last local, I got a buy on round 2, right? And then the Kano player matched into an Arachne, and the Arachne had no AB. And I looked at the Arachne player, and I was like, you should just scoop, and then you and I should play. And he's like, that's a great idea. And he's like, I scoop. And then, and then him and I sat down and played a match instead. And the Kano player was like, what? I'm like, you don't get to play. You're playing Kano. Go away. Like, he's like, there's nothing he could do. He can never win that matchup. They could play that matchup 1,000 times. He'll win 0%. Like, it.
He also doesn't need an opponent to play out that
exactly.
game.
I was like, you can sit over there and just draw your hands and play off the top of your deck. And he's like, we played the game, and he's like, that was much better than playing against Kano. I was like, yes, I agree. That was much more fun. Okay, so let's get into our Discord questions. We do have a decent amount of them, and I was reading through them, and pretty good. Our Discord questions are asked by our premium members in our Discord. If you'd like to be able to ask questions on the podcast, as well as a ton of other features, including gameplay videos and asking the team questions in general, or following along with our tournament reports, feel free to join the Discord below. So first question of the night is going to come from, let's see what I got here. Robo. And Robo asks, for the RTN season, how viable is it to tech against opponents that you're expecting to see? I'm on the fence of people meta calling with certain heroes like Prism, or if they know someone is going to play a certain deck, should they tech for that, or should they just do overall meta calls? So that was a good question. Not all at once.
Yeah, I can go first.
Yeah.
You talked about this before.
Yeah.
Cody's talked about this on the cast before. I think if you have like strong players who consistently top and win your events, like teching for them at an RTN makes sense, because like you have to get through them to win. I guess RTN you need a top 4, so maybe not as hard. It's more like overall meta, but yeah, I think there is merit to teching.
Yep. Connor?
Yeah, if you're a big fish, you got to know what the other big fish are doing, and you got to be ready for them. It's like you're going to run into them like the last couple rounds in important matches too. Like you have to at least have a plan. Don't be like, oh, the best player in the area plays Levia. I don't have a sideboarding plan for Levia. Like you got to at least have something ready. If not, like a couple like cool card choices in your pocket to help the matchup. But no, I think it's fine to like, especially in the local level where you're going to generally know a lot of the people. If it's like your hometown store, if you go somewhere else, so you have to drive a couple hours, maybe you don't want to tech as hard. I mean, maybe you know the regional kind of end bosses, but if it's not like your homies, you can be a little bit more open-ended in how you build your deck. But if it's your local guys and you know what everyone's going to play, I definitely encourage trying to metagame.
Hard tech. One of the guys who's riding with me to like all the RTNs is playing Kano. You better believe I'm playing 3 Oasises and all my null. There's not even a question. Any deck that I build, I'm putting it all in there. Like, and I would do that at any tournament for anyone who's going. Like, this is the tournament. If you're going to play something that I feel I have a way to counter, or if I think this area plays a lot of this deck, then I'll definitely tech in a way or play a deck in a way to try and win that tournament. I mean, that's why you're there, right? No shame. There is no shame in teching against the people in your car. Deal with it. Especially if you're playing Kano, then you deserve it.
Yeah, fuck them. Do you remember that team that we'd run into during RTN season 1 of those War Machine guys?
Yeah, I think I know who you're referring to.
Do you remember their team name? I'm spacing on it. So, funny story with them. I'm sorry that I can't remember your team name right now. All I can think of is the Green Reinar guys, because they all
yeah. I know which team you're talking about. Yep. Is it Green Tree? It's not Green Tree, right? It was something.
No.
Well, we can edit something in. I remember going to one of the RTNs that first season. This is a story of what not to do. They went up to us at one of them, and they were like, me and Jimmy, because we were like, we always played Prism, and they just went up to us and we're like, we're not losing to you this time. We've got poppers. And they dedicated their entire sideboard to poppers. And then they didn't face us during the entire event and lost because their deck was shit because they were just all poppers. Don't do that. Don't go to that extreme. But I think it's very reasonable to do some small metagaming towards people in your area. Like, for instance, I know in previous seasons, Dromai is very popular in my area. So I usually have some extra Dromai tech in my deck. And then something that I was doing for a while, this is actually something that happened at a bunch of them, where I would metagame my deck for the mirror, and then the other Dromais would face me, lose, and go, oh, wow, that was a good idea. And then next week, they'd play that tech. But then I changed my tech the next week for that, and they oh man, I wasn't ready for that, and I think you get a lot of value out of it. Like I know I won a bunch of those games because I was teched for the mirror, so like, but I think like teching for like one person maybe it really depends. It's got to be like
unless
really
they're Kano, then you just tech really hard against them every time.
Yeah, I think it's more for like
Here's all-
ProQuest. Like if you know you're going to see them in the finals, right? Like,
Yep.
and you need that for the invite. For Arcane,
Yeah,
I think it's a little less.
If you have to win that game, okay. But like a lot of times too, like, oh, there's a Kano, I'll take that L. Like I can take one loss. If there's just a one, I think sometimes that's fine too, where it's how many are there in the field. So I think it's more worth it to tech for if a lot of the good players in your area are on specific strategies. Like in my area, a lot of the good players are on Dromai. So I tech for that because I know I'm probably going to face like 1 to 2 of them if I hit top 8. Like it's almost guaranteed. There's like the last one I played, top 4 was all Dromai. So like I got to be prepared for that.
Yep, that's a good point. I do like if you know an area plays a certain deck, you should always then tech. Like it's actually just incorrect not to tech if you know an area plays a certain type of deck. I do think if the Kano is in the car with you going to your event, then putting Oasis in your deck, you already know there's going to be one Kano, so the chances of additional Kanos, you get additional value. So I think mathematically it means you have to
see
tech.
like my area, 0 Kanos.
Yeah.
So maybe we can get a gentleman's agreement to not play Kano if we all just show up with like AB5 and Oasis fights and just destroy their morale. And then eventually there'll be no more Kanos. We can go back to building our decks normally.
I mean, we can just break their legs before they even get in, right? Like,
he does only have 30 life. That is true. He's not very physically imposing.
Okay.
Break his Storm Striders.
So overall, yes, tech for your meta. Do it. Next question. Very, very good question here coming from Ham. Who's your driver for Mario Kart? I'll go first.
I'm more of a Crash Team Racing player.
Ooh. Toad. Because I always pick the shortest people in any game that I play, and any character creator I make them the shortest you can make them. I have to stay on brand. I like representation.
Funny monkey, man.
The Kong. Connor?
I'd you like me some Luigi? Just because it has some nice like little brother energy that I'm into. I like that.
Okay, next question. It's going to be coming from Sifnin, I guess. There's, yeah. It says, do you believe in overthinking? I feel as a person that researches a lot, I can see a lot of lines during a game, and I end up losing myself during a game. I start misplaying because I'm thinking too much. Is this coping, or is this actually a relevant thing that happens? Hey, Dan, you want to talk about this
What's
one?
Yeah, it's definitely something I suffer from time to time. I think like the biggest thing about overthinking is I think what you're kind of alluding to in the question is that it leads to tunneling. I don't even know how to answer this. I can't even get my thoughts together. I think it's a very real thing.
Don't overthink it, Dan.
Yeah, I'm overthinking it right
Just
now.
answer the question.
Yeah, it's a real thing. It's valid, and there are spots where it's important to not overthink, but like tank real hard. But I think if you can minimize the amount of time you have to tank each game, it's very beneficial to like your like long tournament fatigue, so you're not like mentally dead by the end of the event. But also just like game by game, like so you're not tunneling super hard. Just like keeping your mind open instead of like having to find like the perfect line and think about all the possible iterations and all that.
Yeah, the mistake that I fall into for overthinking is always like I think through a line, and then I think about 4 other lines, and then I find like on the 5th line, I'm like, oh, this one's the best. I'm going to do this one. And then I'm like, oh, I forgot that they had this thing in play. I forgot that they war monitors me. I forgot that they had Stalin Fleshpad that's trying to mess this all up. Like you know what the lay of the land is, and then you go deep in the tank, and then you forget about something, and then just run head first into it. Like that kind of overthinking is like the worst also, because you feel so smart as you're making the decision, and then you feel so dumb immediately, and it's like the worst combination of things. So I think that the best way to overcome that is to have like a kind of simplistic process, I think, Dan, I know you brought this up once, but like it's like you think of your line, you do your math, and then you think through the line again with the math, and then you try to make a decision. If you have that like repetition and that good habit building, then you'll avoid overthinking and you'll feel confident in your choices. Because that's really what overthinking is like you're not confident. You aren't sure which way to go. But if your process kind of gets you there and you feel confident about it, you'll kind of won't be overthinking. You won't be torturing yourself also. Like that's the biggest thing is I am always torturing myself over which decision is right. And I do not want to be tortured all day. It's a long day.
Yeah, I think the other thing you can do is just like every tournament where I've done well, I've done this very well, which is just stay present during your games. Like if your mind starts sidetracking, like focus back on the table, like what's happening, what's going on around me. Read every card that your opponent plays. Read every card that you're going to play. Like, I don't know. It's easy to like go in the tank, like you're saying, and then forget something on the board state. So just make sure before you make every action that like you're present, right? You're playing the game. You're here to win. That kind of thing.
This is fresh for me because I was just playing the new Prism deck. The problem I get is decision paralysis. I'm overloaded by so much information of so many different play lines that I shut down sometimes. And I'm like, I have no idea how the heck I'm supposed to play this. And then I sit there and then my brain just turns off. So then I just sit there for a second. I'm like, I'm taking too long. So I just do something because I don't know what to do. For me, that happens if I'm not familiar with something. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't have the reps. I personally need the pattern recognition of I've been in this numerous times. I've seen this hand. I've seen this block. I've seen this situation. I've been here before. I know exactly this play because I've been here before. If I don't have that, then unless I have enough experience with it and then I can draw parallels to other things. But if it's like completely fresh, like with the Prism deck that I was just playing, I don't know what I'm doing yet. So like, oh, this is my first time seeing this situation, but I have a ton of reps with this deck. Okay, what situations are similar to this and I can find patterns there?
Yeah, to piggyback off that, I think if you are having overthinking problems when you are playing in a tournament setting or a game period, I think you have incomplete prep. Because I think Pheano and I are very similar in how we approach and how we play the game. We're the opposite. Sometimes we play too fast and we miss a tunic counter, or we play our tournament game, our kill round improperly and lose on the spot. So maybe we could think a little bit more. But we are very much heuristic gamers where we have done something enough times where we know how to play in that situation. And we know based on where we're at in the game currently, what's happening, how we should take the game in what direction in order to try and win. And I think if you are running into a spot where you're overthinking a lot and you've been playing a deck for a long time, you need to start building heuristics into your play engine in order to not have to think so much. You shouldn't have to think that much. Like a lot of the times, like a good example is like Icelander. The normal heuristic is if I see Wounded Bull, I play Wounded Bull because any other option is basically incorrect, like most of the time. Now, occasionally it's not. And so the first several times you play it, the heuristic is play Wounded Bull if I see Wounded Bull. And then sometimes you'll learn the times where you can't play Wounded Bull. And now you have two heuristics. So now you only have to think about two things. Which heuristic is this Wounded Bull in? Is this the always play it when I see it? Or is it that other rarer heuristic where I don't play it? And like this should be like a pattern that's for like most decks that you play enough where it's just immediate recognition. You don't have to overthink in those cases. And then once you get to that point, then it's good to slow down again to make sure you're just not missing things. So it's always like a cycle pattern. So it's like, where are you in your training cycle for that deck? But if this,
yeah, I can attest to that.
Yeah, I mean, Dan's a great example. Like we had so many conversations about Icelander, and Dan was number one about, I know I need a heuristic for when I do this.
Yeah. And that season, I like forced myself to play fast and like lean on my heuristics and not tanking. And like I was okay sacking like a little bit of efficiency here and there just to like keep my mental up so I don't like make a like full on misplay. And I found it to actually be really effective. Like I was kind of experimenting, and I think it's something I'm going to continue to integrate.
And I was the opposite. We would go to a battle hardened, and Dan's like, I'm going to play fast. And I'd be like, I'm going to play slow. And then because we were just in two different cycles, like we had heuristics, but like we needed to work on the other part of it where, you don't just always play the heuristic, right? Okay. Good question. Next one we have here from Mike at Blockout Party. And he is saying, when going into a high stakes draft pod, do you consider the classes / heroes that other players in the pod tend to favor? Does that help you draft your seat, or does it cloud your ability to read signals? And I will say I just did this at the calling. I looked next to me and said, oh, there's a Michael Hamilton next to me. And then I looked at who was passing to me, and I was like, whoa, there's a Yuanji passing to me. And then I looked at, oh, there's a Tarek over here that I've already drafted with. And I went, well, I know the guy next to me, Hamilton, is going to play Warrior because that's all he's played the entire tournament. And I know Yuanji really likes Guardian, and he'll say that he's going to play Warrior, and he will. But I didn't think he was going to play Warrior in that one. And then I saw Tarek next to him. I was like, this man, I did not see draft Warrior. In my pod, he drafted Reinar. Or not Reinar, but KO. And I said, I'm forcing Warrior. Before I even sat down, I looked at the seating arrangement and I said, I'm going Warrior. And I'm going to tell Hamilton not to be Warrior. And I should be kind of free. Now, could have backfired? Absolutely. But yes, I'm 100% playing the pod in that situation because I know these players are good. I know they can read signals. I'm not doing that at my RTN. I'm not sitting down and being like, I'm going to hope the person next to me reads the signal. I'm just going to draft my seat. Other thoughts?
I agree with you, and I have an example of how it can go wrong. At Pro Tour Baltimore, I had two seats to my right. Very strong player who I was pretty confident would not have anything to do with Ranger. And if they sent me a signal saying that they're not Ranger, I can trust it. And the person directly to my right was kind of similar. I didn't know them as well, but I knew they were a good player. I got past the Ranger gas. I was like, great, I'll be the Ranger. This is fine. I know how to do this. And then other people moved in anyway, and it wasn't the best class for that set. And because of how the packs were collated, they were just more or less random cards from the set. There wasn't cards you could depend on. I got absolute train wreck draft. 103 Pro Tours immediately over after a good CC start.
I've never done that personally because I've never been in a draft pod with top players and such where I knew their draft tendencies. So I couldn't say that I could do that, but I've done that from the other side. Monarch, I was pretty vocal about the fact that I'm going to force Prism on social media. As a social experiment, I wanted to know if Pheano, the Prism guy, sits down at a pod, is that going to spook people off of Prism? I wanted to know because that's just not a thing in Magic and shit. You're not, oh man, LSV's in this pod? I guess I just can't draft blue. Fuck me. That's just not real. And in one of my pods that worked. Two of the people were my locals in the pod, and they were like, fuck. And they just didn't draft Prism. And then most of the other people also didn't. It was a 2 Prism pod. And then one of the other ones, most of the other pod that weekend, I think it was everyone did the same thing except for, I think one of the guys passing into me did the smart thing and went, fuck you, I'm going to be Prism because I'm passing into you. But then we valued cards differently, so we ended up not fighting over the same card. So that worked to my advantage, which is why I was comfortable forcing it, because I knew we drafted the deck differently than other people. And then the person opposite drafted Prism, so that kind of worked out.
Yeah.
I do think it comes up even more so if you know your round one opponent and you kind of have an idea of what their preference might be. I remember like a ProQuest top 8, the guy who I was going to play in round one had played Teklo in both drafts, and I kind of figured he was going to be Teklo again. So I was like, all right, this kind of feels like a match deck. I have to have every kind of overpower, every kind of like way to finish the game to get over the top against Teklo, because I know it's my first matchup, and that's going to matter a lot. Yep. So if you're in that kind of situation, I think it's really good. And then if you know the person directly to your right or left has preferences, it does help you. It is a risky game to play, though. Like Dan said, it's definitely a risky game. Sometimes you have to know when you have to bulldoze a path or when you have to follow the breadcrumbs that are kind of given to you. And just whatever one you pick, be certain. That's my main thing. Like if you're like, I'm going to force Brute or Warrior or whatever, cut every single brute card for as long as you can until it's not an option. But don't go 2 picks in, 3 picks in, and be like, oh, I don't know, I'm gonna like middle it and then try to take some hybrid cards and end up back on brute. It's just like you are sending awful signals downstream, and just pick a path and stick to it, but have that recognition of, do I bulldoze or do I need to like follow what people are passing me?
Yeah, I think
I'm a bulldoze enjoyer.
I think you made a good point though. For RTN, you only have to win one game. So like, if you sit down in top 8, like you only have to get top 4 to get your invite. So like, knowing what the person across from you that you're going to play is going to draft, and drafting like the opposite of that is a viable strategy at RTNs. That's
or even just having sideboard
that's
cards.
like a metagame on a metagame though, because you're metagaming for the tournament structure at that point, which is like completely fair. That you should do that because that's the point of playing, right? Every edge you can get. So I think,
and there's small choices too that you can make that get a lot of equity. You know, like pick up that blue, reinforce the line if you think your opponent's gonna be playing warrior. Like that card's nice and flexible. Pick up like value starting stake higher if you think they're gonna be warrior. Like there's a lot of different things that you can get. I remember Jacob Shaker crushed me at Pro Tour Baltimore because he just had like all the anti Benji tech. He just had like a yellow piece of mind, blue piece of mind, and like some of the traps, and I just like literally never did unblockable damage. And I was just like, oh, he knew to be prepped for Benji. And so if you can have those little things and pick them up in small spots, like it really does help your equity a lot.
yep. I mean, I like to thank Tarek for helping that match, helping my draft there, because I was worried that Yuanji was going to just know that I wanted the warrior and then take warrior from me. But however, Tarek was a very generous man and passed a bomb guardian card out of pack 1 right to Yuanji. And he said, I guess this is a signal. And then Tarek said, no, it's not a signal. I also guardian. We both lose together, which is just silly. And for some reason that meant I was just like open warrior seat. And I was like, hey, thank you. I was looking at the first 2 packs, seeing if Yuanji took a warrior card. When 2 packs came by, no warrior card, I'm like, I'm good. I'm in. Like, we're in so hard. So thanks, Tarek, for train wrecking both of your guys' drafts for us. I really appreciate it. Okay. Next here. Next question is going to be from Fighting Walloon. It says, do the imperfect and lower powered decks of Limited require different skills to play well than the more powerful, consistent decks of CC? If so, what do you think of those differences? I think it's a very interesting question. So, does the skill set required to be good at Limited, is that vastly different than the skill set for CC? I'll let someone else go. I have pretty direct thoughts on this.
Yeah, my first thought is like a lot of CC you can just like copy paste other people's work. So it's like to some degree, yeah, it's like a lot less skill, right? You can just implement what they implemented. And even if you don't do it to perfection, if it's like a good matchup, you're still gonna win probably. Where like I guess like if you're building a deck from scratch, then it's like more equal. But like in Limited, you have to construct the deck strategically. Like you have to like pick the cards in the right order to send signal. Like there's so many layers to it, and just you have to put the right pieces together. And typically in Limited games, I find that like you need to know how to get the best use out of each of your cards, and like remember that throughout the whole game. So like as you're out of some of your like red attacks and your like power cards, you need to like have in the back of mind, like I still have this play to make later plus this play, and then I'm gonna close the game with this attack react or something. It's just like I think it's so much harder.
Yeah, I definitely agree that Limited soccer. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Cody.
No, you're fine. I just think that in CC, a lot of skill gets covered up by repetition and practice and experience, doing the one thing over and over and over again. And so everyone kind of ends around the same level with a couple of percentages up and down, right? However, in Limited, all that is stripped away and you are left alone and scared, and you have to then on the fly with no real prep, without someone telling you what the correct play is, decide all of the correct plays every single round off something that a deck configuration you've never seen before. And I think there's a lot of true skill expression in Limited. Now, there is a floor. You need to have a deck that is playable to this point, and then you get to express skill. If you have a deck under here, you do not get to express skill. So once you hit past the bar in Limited of my deck is playable, I get to express skill, then I think the games are very skillful because no one's holding your hand. You haven't been able to like watch a video on how to play this. You haven't been able to be in that situation a million times. And I think there is like a base level of skill that is expressed in limited that you don't get in CC.
I'm going to small disagree with you there. I'm going to small disagree. You're like, deck should be here to express skill. And if it's down here, like no skill expression. Noah's deck for PT3 was like down here. And he expressed so much skill with it. He was like, I have like 2 red arrows in my deck.
In
I
sealed?
have to get all of my damage.
Oh, you're talking about draft.
In draft. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. His deck was butt cheeks. It was one of the worst decks I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's just the Noah special. That's not a normal thing.
Yeah, I was referring specifically to sealed.
You should have seen our team sealed deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's very good at getting the most out of his cards. He's very good at that. He's like, yeah, I need to win with these 3 traps in my pitch stack. That's nothing else matters except for these 3 traps that I know are counter pitched to his pump, and then that react, and then they're just going to die out of nowhere and not expect it.
You can definitely do it, but it makes the game a lot harder to the point where your skill can't overcome it. Right? It's just like one of my losses in sealed was just like my opponent had 6 block 4 cards in his deck that I saw. That was all the only ones that I saw. And I was just like, yeah, I can't beat that. Like, that's so much value in block. And like that you can't overcome. But if your decks are like around the same level, which most of the time they're going to be, like you get a lot of skill expression in draft and sealed in the actual games and the construction as well. Cool. Last question of the night. Following the last 2 weeks of events and performances of Battle Hardens, have any heroes shifted in power, in your opinion, either positively or negatively as a result? And this is from Kuzco. Prism? Hey, Prism?
I think every deck has simultaneously. Is that correct? I don't know. They've all gotten better and worse at the same time. I don't know. We talked about the meta already. But yeah, Prism's a good one. That definitely went up in stocks.
Dude, Victor players
over here crying. Like condensed down together.
I don't know.
I don't know where people had Jeromai at before, but I think that's come down a little bit.
Hopefully. They need to learn, get in their place.
I thought Dromai just did well. Isn't it back up now?
No.
Aren't Dromai
stocks get in the Dromai slot. The Dromai slot, go down. It's like the Kano slot.
Didn't Dromai just win like a Battle Harden or something?
We don't talk about that.
Oh, okay.
That didn't happen.
So I'm saying, I don't know. Like every deck seems better and also worse because these other decks are now better. And
yeah. Except for Victor. No breakout Victors yet.
He won Blitz.
That doesn't count. Blitz is not a real format.
I agree.
until I have a reason to care about it, it's not a real format.
I do like blocking in Blitz, though. That is kind of a fun proposition. But no, I think that the Brutes are the main thing that's really impressed me power level wise in the last 2 weeks. We saw UT smash people with KO. There's been a lot of Levia top 8s. Just I think that Brute in general, obviously, it's got a bunch of new cards and it's really pushed, and I think it's really powerful. That's definitely the thing where you're like, oh, I'm not sure how this hype's going to pan out, and it's solid. It's very real, I think.
I think besides Prism, I've been not very surprised by what has done well. I think the Prism one was surprising. I think Teklo getting there was like, if you've ever played Teklo, then you know if he gets the right matchups, they're going to get there. If they don't get the right matchups, then the deck's unplayable, and that's why it doesn't do well. But it's going to have a miracle run sometime, right? And then like KO doing well, and Levia and Bravo and all the other things like that. All I think that makes sense. I think the first surprise I ever had was this season so far is Prism. That's I
will say, anyone watching this, if you haven't watched the game that he played into the Kasai, that was a really entertaining game to watch, of just like them both slamming haymakers, like resolved Raisin Army on one side, then resolved Teklo Singularity on the other, and it was just like, I have no idea who's going to win this game. It's just they're just playing all of the crazy
That was the
cards.
only game I watched. Yep.
It was anyone watching this, if you didn't watch that game, I'd recommend going watch it. It was a fun game to watch.
Yep. I thought they were entertaining. It's always fun to see a hero that doesn't get represented very often, or doesn't, get on a run very often either.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I have to go dig out all of my Prism cards because maybe I'm going to play this deck again. So goodbye, everyone. See ya.
7
What we
envelope
could do
in
here is go ahead
darkness.
and play the envelope.
All 3 pitches of Envelope and Darkness.